What's going on, guys? We're here to just have a quick chat about the MVP problem in RLCS and how it feels like having three subjective picks is probably not the way to go, in my opinion, at the very least. I think the overall MVP makes sense. You go subjective. The other two, I think, should be based on some type of stat, which we will get to here in a little bit. But before we get to that, please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, especially you K-Corp fans. And then pause the video right here, K-Corp fans. All right, Vatira should have definitely not won that defensive MVP. We'll start there, and we'll pick it up from there. So let me get into what I'm talking about here. First off, defense is a weird one. Like, I was surprised because we didn't know who won offense and defense until we saw it on the graphic. Defense is a weird one because it really comes down to more of a team play thing than anything. So here are the stats from just the main event, because I think that's the only thing that should be taken into consideration for one of these awards. And you go to goals conceded, and like K-Corp was third best defense, but barely, like almost fourth best, and like was miles behind a Vitality who put up like record breaking numbers, 1.08 goals against per game. I feel like no matter what, it should have came from a Vitality player. I think Zen we had on the nominees. So I think Zen should have probably won that. I think Rado probably should have won overall. Zen should have won defensive. Offense, we'll get into in a bit. But I think the issue is defense one is also just very hard to actually pinpoint who you give it to. Offense, I think you can mostly look at numbers and kind of figure it out. Kind of why I believe LJ won. He had the most goals plus assists in the entire main event. And I get it. A lot of those were in one matchup. Sometimes Space Station very likely had easier matchups throughout, so he might be able to pad those numbers. But he did do it against the number one overall defense in Mina. Sure, that might have been a bad series for them, but he still pulled it off, right? So I don't really mind that pick necessarily. But I have some solutions that I think should be considered going forward. I personally am not a fan, again, of MVP, then offensive and defensive MVP, because, again, subjective. For two reasons. One, I feel like offensive and defensive MVP should never be the same as the overall MVP, because it does feel like a number two MVP sort of thing, where like we couldn't give it to you because we couldn't give you MVP, but we wanted to congratulate you anyway. That's how it kind of feels. So I think one thing that you could do instead is for offensive MVP, instead just call it Golden Bumper, do goals plus assists per game, but only for a top four team. I think that'll reduce the likelihood that someone else wins it. Like back in Boston, I think Jufinho probably would have won it. He had the most goals per game. Not sure where his assists were. They probably were very low, but he could have won it after just two series, right? So you kind of want someone who has a lot of games under their belt and is on a good team. And I think if you're in the top 25% of the teams at one of these events, then you should be up for the run-in for one of these MVPs. So that would have knocked LJ out. So, for instance, for this one, it would have been, I think, Seiko would have won it just barely over both Itachi and Zen. I think we're very, very close. So let's look at goals per game. Well, let's look at assists, because I think assists might be a better way to show it. Zen's at 0.68. Seiko tied with him 0.68. Then you look at goals per game. Then you see Seiko just a small bump ahead of him. And then I believe Itachi was pretty close as well. His goals were better, I believe. Our goals were about the same as Seiko, but he did drop off in assists. So there's a couple people around there. Vatira was close as well in assists. But I think that's a better race to see who wins that. And then it's just a numbers game. And I think it makes it a lot easier. Golden Bumper, boom. Goals plus assists per game. You have to be on the top four team to win it. Easy award to give out at the end. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see who's won the most of those awards. Because honestly, those are the two offensive numbers that matter, right? Pretty much nothing else matters. So long as you put the ball in the back of the net more times, that's what matters. So I think that would be a fun award. You could split it out and do one for Playmaker, one for Golden Striker, that whole thing. But I think just having one is good. We don't really need to clutter all the awards up again. Number two, for defense, what I would do is just give the golden wall or something like that, golden sheet, clean sheet, whatever you want to call it. We can workshop names later. And just give it to a team. We don't need a defensive player award necessarily. I think most of the time defense is done by a team completely, and that's just kind of how it works out. So just give it to the team that gives up the least goals conceded per game, as long as you're a top 14, and that's it. And then boom, you get your golden sheet for a team award, and you get your golden bumper for a player award, and then you give an overall MVP. And then I think overall MVP obviously can be the same player because it's a stat based number. So then you could have Zen win both offensive or golden bumper and the MVP. But in our case now, it always feels like it shouldn't be that way. It feels like, oh, let's give offense to someone else. Like, let's give offense to Seiko because he lost in the finals, and then we'll give the overall to Zen, right? But if Zen would have lost, then maybe we give it to Monkey Moon as overall, and then give it to Zen as offensive MVP, right? That's what it feels like. It feels like kind of like a part. So I shouldn't say participation prize because it's obviously still good, but it's just like the number 2 MVP. It usually comes down to. So that's one thing I would definitely change going forward. The one thing I do love now compared to what we used to do is I love that it's not any saves per game award for anyone, because that award always felt terrible. I never really got the whole idea. Oh, that's the wrong team. Let me go. Bam, there we go. So I never really understood the saves per game stat, because it was always like someone on a bad team is going to win it because they give up a ton of shots, and they won $1,000 for that when, like, at that time, OCE was winning barely any prize money, and we're giving $1,000 out to one of the worst teams players because they just sit in net. It's like, that didn't feel that great. So that's one thing I like, is that we don't do that anymore. The other thing I like is that we do not give money to these awards. I don't think there should be extra money tied to it. I do like the idea of getting a medal and all that stuff. There's a lot. It's a pride factor more in an MVP. Like, we're already giving away a ton of money. Like, if you do well in these tournaments, there's no need to give a little bit extra to one player because they got the MVP. Like, give them a medal. That's fine. But I do like the idea of, for like doing the goals plus assists per game thing, like, people won't try and like take a couple extra goals at the end or something, which wouldn't happen anyway, like, generally speaking, because, you know, you're a top 4 team, you're playing in very, very close games. But it just feels better. Like, no one's trying to actually win this because it's a money thing. And if they are trying to win, it's because of a pride thing, which is fine. So that's what I would prefer. I don't know. What do you guys think? Because I feel like MVPs are kind of in this weird boat right now. Once we added offensive, defensive MVP, like, I always felt they're in this weird spot. And I think we can do it better. So if you guys have any ideas, throw them in the comments below. And let's chat about it. Because honestly, that's what I think. I think we should move to more, you know, golden bumper, golden wall, golden sheet, whatever it is. The type of award system. And let me know who you think should have won the 3 MVPs of this tournament. Like, personally, I think it probably should have been Seiko for offensive. Defensive, I probably would have done Zen. And then overall, I probably would have gave to Rado. So that would have been my 3 MVPs. Like, I think there's probably more of an argument for Zen for overall during that last tournament, or the last series of the tournament, but I think I still would have given it to Rado anyway. But that's all I got here. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on Monday. Later.